This video is about expansionary fiscal policy. It's predominantly looking at these points here, which are like evaluation points that you can use in a longer question, maybe a 15, a 20 mark, a 25 mark question about fiscal policy. So I'll explain briefly what expansionary fiscal policy is, and then I'm going to talk through in this video some of these here about reasons that you might bring up to discuss the effectiveness of fiscal policy, the implications of fiscal policy, and things like that. So first of all, expansionary fiscal policy. Remember, if something expands like a balloon, it gets bigger. And the point of this is that it's going to increase real output in the economy. It's going to expand the economy. That's the objective of expansionary fiscal policy. And remember that fiscal policy is about government spending and it's about taxation. So the choices that are made by government about these two things. How much money are they going to spend? What are they going to spend it on? Are they going to spend more or less? And are they going to increase taxes or decrease taxes or leave them the same for people? If you have effective expansionary fiscal policy, remember this is a demand side policy. And that means that its objective is to increase aggregate demand. So you can see on this diagram here that if aggregate demand increases, it goes from AD to AD1, and that causes real output to increase from Y to Y1. And in my diagram, because at this point the spare capacity in the economy is starting to run out a bit as the LRAS curves upwards here, it also causes the price level to increase from P to P1, so there's an element of inflation there. Now I'm going to look through some of these. How is the budget deficit impacted? So if you're using expansionary fiscal policy, that means it's likely that you're going to see an increase in government spending, and you're also or going to see a decrease in taxation. So there's more money going out from the government and there's less money coming into the government. And therefore, it's more likely that you're going to end up with a situation where government spending is greater than tax revenue. And if this happens, you're more likely to increase any budget deficit. So this can be a negative consequence of using expansionary fiscal policy. If you have a higher budget deficit, it says here what are the implications. The implications of your budget deficit being larger because the government has spent more money than they've received in tax revenue. They're going to have to get this money from somewhere in order to have been spending more than they have received in tax revenue, and therefore government borrowing will have to go up. And because government borrowing goes up, this will increase the national debt. I'm going to run out of space here. Increase national debt. If the UK economy has more national debt, that means that we've borrowed money, usually by issuing bonds. The government will issue those bonds to get in money. At some point, they're going to have to pay back this money that they've borrowed. And that means that they'll have to pay back the money they've borrowed and the interest on top of that. So, for example, on the bonds, they'll have to pay a premium. That's a bit like interest on the bonds. And because you've got to pay back the national debt and the interest, that will mean ultimately that they've got to find the money from somewhere to do that. And likely in the future, in order to pay back the national debt, they will have to increase taxation. So the opposite of this. So people will have to pay more tax in future. And also, as a way of paying back the national debt, having enough money to do that, they might have to decrease government spending, again the opposite of this. And those will have implications for people's lives because they'll have to pay more taxes and the government will be spending less money on government services. So you can argue that in the longer term, this is going to cause potentially problems for people living in the country. So you could even argue for future generations, it will be a negative. In the next videos, I'm going to carry on talking about these other points.